Joining us now, Edward Yeranian, our man in the Middle East. He's with the Voice of America. He's with CBS Radio. He's with the John Fredericks Radio Network across the globe. And he's with us now in Egypt. Edward, great to have you.
Thank you, John.
Edward, give us your take now. Mike Pompeo going to Saudi Arabia. The Saudis changing their story for the third time. Now the Saudis saying, okay, here's what happened. So first we said that Jamal Khashoggi left after an hour. Then we said we couldn't find the camera. Then we said we didn't know what happened to him. Then we threatened America and other Western democracies with retaliation if any sanctions were put on them. Then we said we were going to raise the price of oil because they did nothing. Now they're saying, well, wait a minute. It appears that he was murdered in our consulate in Istanbul, but it was a interrogation gone bad, and it was rogue, and there was no transparency, and King Salman knew nothing about it. You've got to be kidding me. What do you make of this, Edward?
Well, the very last part of it is probably true. King Salman probably knew nothing about it because he's very old, and it's his son who's running the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom, Mohammed bin Salman. Okay, let's assume for a minute that he's guilty, Mohammed bin Salman, that he asked for this to happen. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. I think our Egyptian hosts don't want me to say anything bad about them. And I don't know what you can say, really, but the geopolitical situation is much more important than the killing of one journalist. I'm a journalist, so of course, if they killed me, I would be upset. But a lot of money rides on this. The well-being of millions of people ride on this if we had an international economic crisis. So I think people should step back and say to themselves, do we really want to have a crisis, assuming that these parties could set off a crisis? And I think they could. And Saudi Arabia, you have different forces inside Saudi Arabia that are battling each other. You have forces in the Gulf that are battling each other, and forces inside the United States that are battling each other. And a lot of parties are trying to take advantage of this and to score political points, which is very dangerous, I think. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Let's go to the Saudi situation. When you said you have a division there, what is the division? And now they're trying to save face because they changed the story 3 times. And now the story is laughable, right? So obviously they murdered this guy, chopped him up in little pieces, and carried him out in McDonald's bags or something. But when you speak of the division within the Saudis, tell me a little more, elaborate on that.
Well, Mohammed bin Salman, King Salman's son, was not originally supposed to be crown prince. His cousin, Mohammed bin Nayef, was supposed to be crown prince. And there are a lot of forces inside the kingdom that would like to see him become crown prince, including a lot of forces in the United States that don't like Mohammed bin Salman. And they're trying to score points with this. I mean, I guess it's normal, assuming Khashoggi was killed. We have no proof that he was killed. We are assuming he was. But once again, a lot of the noise that's coming out on this is coming out from the forces that oppose Mohammed bin Salman, the forces that oppose President Trump, because President Trump is aligned with Mohammed bin Salman and with King Salman, and also aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, which I don't want to say that Jamal Khashoggi belonged to it, but he sympathized with it. And a lot of the people that are making the loudest noises here are from the Muslim Brotherhood. And they would love to see a destabilization in the Middle East, including countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Libya, places where they have major interests and where they stand to gain if Saudi Arabia suddenly became incapacitated, or if their economy suddenly was in deep trouble, and if suddenly the succession to King Salman were no longer clear. So a lot is at stake here. A lot is riding on this. And millions of people depend on the economies of the countries that are sort of in limbo with the Saudi situation. If the Saudi crown prince fell, this involves an alliance with the United Arab Emirates, with Egypt, with Jordan. They're aligned with one side in Libya rather than the other. And all the parties here, and against Qatar, and all the parties here stand. And if they suffer, their people would suffer because their economies would suffer. So there's a lot riding on this that is way beyond the pale of the death of one journalist and the justice for the family of Jamal Khashoggi. Even if I personally knew Jamal Khashoggi and said, well, I feel bad about it, and yes, he should have justice. But that is not the main issue here. The main issue is the geopolitical implications, because President Trump, the Republican Party, are aligned with Saudi Arabia. The Democrats are aligned with Qatar. Qatar is trying to score points here, both economically and politically. They're aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Democrats in the U.S. media are making a lot of noise about this. And you have to ask yourself why one journalist would require this much noise and this sort of feeding frenzy in the media, because billions of dollars are riding on this. The Democrats take money from Qatar. The Republicans take money from Riyadh. So it's a very complicated economic picture, very complicated power picture, and it's way beyond the fate and well-being of Jamal Khashoggi.
So you're suggesting the U.S. should just sweep it under the rug?
No, I really don't know what to say. It's in the hands of the Lord, to be honest with you, way beyond my mere powers to say what's right and what's wrong. But I would like to say that millions of people, the fate of millions of people, depend on the economic well-being of some of these countries, and it's way beyond the fate of one person. And the noise that's being made about the fate of one person, as if it's a life and death situation, is way beyond the actual implications. If suddenly Mohammed bin Salman fell, if suddenly the Saudi economy collapsed, if suddenly they tried to retaliate and pulled their money out of the New York Stock Exchange or out of London, if suddenly they had caused a war with Iran because Iran wanted to take advantage of the fact that Saudi Arabia was in trouble politically, King Salman is like King Lear. His kingdom is in trouble, and he's an old man, and the succession is probably, months away, I would say. And there are forces inside the kingdom that don't want Mohammed bin Salman to become king. So those forces would love to see him get into trouble. But all of this could set off a firestorm, an international firestorm that's way beyond the implications of the death of one journalist.
Well, you do have to admit, Edward, that a journalist going into a consulate to get a piece of paper to get married and getting chopped up in little pieces and taken out in doggy bags in a consulate in a foreign country, which is supposed to be internationally your safe haven, you do have to admit that's not a good thing, right? I mean, that's not something that we can just say, well, because obviously this is just my opinion. I mean, I don't believe that any of this was done without Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's direct authorization. That's just my opinion. It's inconceivable to me that 15 Saudis, security and intel, would fly to Istanbul, check into a hotel, check out the same day, fly back, and no one knew anything about it. They just took it upon themselves to get a Lear jet. I mean, the whole thing is inconceivable. So obviously this was planned. The guy was murdered, and it was done in a cold-blooded, barbaric fashion, right for all the world to see, and they lied about it. And I guess your position is, okay, it's bad, but if you react or retaliate, then it puts the world in a more dangerous place economically. So I guess this is really what MBS was banking on, that there would be a firestorm and then everybody would just look the other way because too much money is invested in the U.S.-Saudi relationship and the Saudi-United Kingdom relationship. Let's not forget that either, because that's equally as big. So there you have it.
That's true. Of course, the United Kingdom is also close to Qatar, which is another facet of this interesting saga.
Well, I don't know what Qatar had to do with it. Qatar had nothing to do with this, Edward. I mean, I disagree with you on that. Qatar had nothing to do with this. Qatar didn't murder the guy. Qatar didn't have him go in there. You know, Qatar had nothing to do with it. They're an innocent bystander here in the middle of a blockade. So I don't know what Qatar has to do with Jamal Khashoggi getting murdered and cut up in the little pieces and put in doggy bags. What does that have to do with them?
Well, I mean, up until now, we really don't know for certain that that's what happened. We think that's what happened, but a lot of the media noise that's coming out to say that those were the things were happening or happened were coming from Qatar. So giving
true.
You know,
right, I'll buy that.
Justice full court, I think we still have to wait until the proof is there of what happened, and the media that's aligned with Qatar is not doing that. They're putting out all this information, some of it which has been definitely wrong. I mean, that's what worries me. They've been putting out a lot of information that's been wrong, and it's clearly trying to exploit the situation.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation. I think there was a newspaper in Germany over the weekend, right, that published something saying that he was basically a spy and he was aligned with Al-Qaeda. And so he was captured there as a enemy of the state or something. So there's a lot of information going around. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no facts on that. But, you know, I think there's got to be some form of reckoning and reconciliation, because you can't have allies where people go into their consulate and get potentially murdered and dismembered in an international setting. I mean, you go into a consulate, that's not supposed to happen to you. And so I think there's got to be some form of reckoning. I don't think the president is just going to sit back and say, well, they didn't mean it. We'll see what happens. He sent Pompeo there. Pompeo's going to get to the bottom of it. And the president has said that he absolutely wants to get to the bottom of it. Once they do that, I think the president will have some sort of a reaction, and it isn't going to be a pat on the head saying, okay, you didn't mean it. We'll see what happens, Edward. But I do get what you're saying. You can't set the world into financial and economic crisis over a single incident. I do understand that. And I do appreciate the time, Edward, and your insight as always. I'm out of time, though. Edward Yeranian live in Cairo, Egypt. Thanks for being with us, Edward.